Hello, hello, hello. Happy 2007 to all of you out there. The peak of indie rock, the peak of blog rock. We're going to get into all of that. Today is Friday, August 18th. This is the Helping Friendly podcast, the 40 for 40 edition, where we have reached the year 2007, probably the last year where people. Yeah, definitely last year where people were like, there's just never going to be fish again. Although there were slight hints of where we were going. We're going to dive into so much about this year. We have shifted our focus in today's episode as we have reached the 24th year in fish history. Hard to believe. We are not yet into the 30s yet, but we're getting there. The 24th year in fish history, where we are finally focused on Mr. Page McConnell, his solo project, and a show of his from July 8th, 2007 at High Sierra, the High Sierra Music Festival in Quincy, California. I am Brian. That is Megan. It is Friday. It is hot here in Colorado. We are a couple weeks out from Fish Dicks. We're just kind of in that in between dog days. But how are you doing, Meg?
I'm great. It's beautiful here in the Berkshires. It's like 70 and breezy and sunny. And I got to pick up my kids from summer camp today.
Oh, that's a big day.
Yeah. Yeah. So I
Did you
picked
have
them
enough
up.
time off?
Yeah, I did. It was a month. I mean, I saw them a week ago when we had visiting weekend, and I spent the whole weekend camping with them. And it was amazing and so special and incredible to be present in the moment with them like that and meet all their camp friends and be around all these girls and all their moms and important women in their lives. It's an all girls camp, and it's just super vibey and very girl power, and I love it, and it was great. So today I picked them up. They've been gone for a month, and just so many tears from the girls. So many hugs, so many tears. It was so sweet.
Those are memories that like you just I mean, they're the best stuff in the world. I remember going to summer camp as a kid, and you'd leave even after like a week. You're like, I know these people better than anyone I've ever known in my entire life, and we're gonna be friends forever. And most of them I've never talked to since, and that's just kind of the way it goes. But the memories were amazing. The time was amazing spent. That is great that you are a whole house again.
Yeah.
My son went back to school this week, which is just like the greatest thing in the world. Finally, get some peace and quiet in the house when we're trying to work here and whatnot. But summer's coming to an end. We are getting to that point in time where we're
Yeah.
starting to look towards the end of Fish Summer Tour. We've got Goose Tour on the horizon, Eggy Tour, Fish Fall Tour. There's just so much that's happening, and we're in that transitional period. Um, we have at the top here, before we get into everything, we have some, I think, somber, sad news that we want to discuss. There was an announcement today about the health and well being of James Casey, the saxophonist and vocalist in Trey Anastasio's band Billy and the Kids. Played with Phil and Friends. He's done a ton of stuff over the last few years. Meg, do you want to share a bit of info on how people out there can help?
Absolutely. Yeah. James has had a really intense battle with cancer, and he's working really hard to get better. And there is a GoFundMe that is being put out and being shared by a lot of people. We're going to put it in our show notes. And so even if you can just contribute a little bit, it makes a big difference. It has grown tremendously over the past few days. It's really kind of heartening to see how people are contributing and giving to James. And this is someone who, it's not just the medical bills, it's also a lack of income right now that he's working against. So that's another reason why we need to support him. So despite the controversy on Twitter, please donate to him and ignore all the people who don't know the facts and spread negativity.
Controversy on Twitter. I wasn't aware that that was something that existed, but I'm sorry to hear about that. But yes, James. I don't know. I'm as someone who's cancer has touched my family in a number of ways. Help from a financial standpoint is an immense thing, and it's not easy for people to ask. And it's definitely the type of thing that people need because medical bills are awful, and food and income and all that sort of stuff really affects people during this. And you're just him and his family are at a point of almost weakness trying to battle through this. And so any sort of help to take any burdens off of their shoulders is a good thing. All right. transitioning, and thank you to everyone in the chat who is sending James your love. Thank you guys so much. That's amazing. Um, transitioning to this pod and transitioning to a time in the world that I have just immense nostalgia for. This is 2007. I was 22 years old. I went overseas for the very first time in my life. I lived before going overseas. I lived in the greatest apartment I will ever live in my entire life, like ever. Wood floors, big bay windows. I saw three mountain peaks out my windows. I had just like these amazing old speakers that like every record I listened to sounded like the greatest record I've ever listened to. The lighting was really nice. I was right across the street from a great pizza place and a bakery and a record shop and an ice cream shop
Wow.
right
Take
around the
me
corner from my
there.
favorite
So
breakfast
good.
ever. Oh, it was amazing. I would go back there in a second. It's now been refurbished and is like a $700,000 condo, but it's just the way of the world. Uh, I rented the place for $625. If anyone's
Oh
been to
my
Missoula,
god.
Montana, you know the Babs apartment complex. That's where I was at, and it was the best. So 2007 for me was like the peak of that kind of like um, you know you're not really an adult, but you're doing kind of fun adult things. I was still in school. I was deep in my studies. Like I said, I was about to go overseas for the very first time in my life. It's kind of like the big kid period in your life where like you can do cool things and you can afford to
Yeah.
do cool things, but like you don't actually have responsibilities. Megan, where were you at in 2007, and do you have as fond of memories of this year as I do? Because I'm gonna just keep gushing.
I know. I'm excited to hear all of your stories. It was a pivotal time for me. I turned 30 this year, so I had a big party on the Lower East Side of Manhattan and got to rage and dance with all my friends all night. And then I got pregnant that fall, and something that I was trying to do, and I was very excited to be pregnant with my daughter Mia, and she was born the next year. But yeah, I was teaching 4th grade in Harlem and starting a family. So it was a very different time. Well, we'll get into the music, but I was listening to comforting music. I wasn't branching out very much. I was listening to a lot of Grateful Dead.
Neil Landry just said that you just described every day of Ryan Storm's life. I'm guessing he's talking about what I described and not
Yeah,
you,
not me.
because I think Ryan was 6 years old in 2007. But Matthew Bro here shares that 2007 was our honeymoon year traveling in Asia. Share
Amazing.
that honeymoon details. I mean, not all of them, but the details about traveling. Share those in the chat here. I did that in 2014, and that was I would love to compare countries visited and what that was like, because that was my honeymoon throughout that year. So uh, really good stuff. But yeah, 2007 we had very different 2007s.
Very.
I remember, it's funny. I One of my best friends, he and his girlfriend at the time got pregnant, very surprised, in October 2007. That was the first experience I had being close to people who were about to have kids. And I remember it was like I was in Amsterdam at the time, and I was reading this email being like, "Oh my god, like we're all going to become adults here tomorrow." So you were experiencing that as well. That's crazy.
Yeah, I was so excited to be a mom. I was, like, trying that whole year. I got married the year before, and I was so excited when that happened. I remember the moment I found out, I just couldn't wait. I was so excited. I loved being pregnant too. It was really fun.
That's
I mean,
amazing.
I made a baby inside me, like, it's so fucking cool.
Yeah, it's like the coolest fucking thing in the world. My daughter said to me yesterday, "You were born too?" And I was like, "Yeah, like
Oh
you're
my god, I
realizing
love
like
that.
this as well." Because we are talking about being brave and the idea of giving birth and also being born and the adventure of being born and that experience. And anyway, we will be there with in my world 8 years from now. Justin Bruce, big fan of the friend
Yes.
of the pod, also mentions 2007 is a strawberry jam and person pitch year. If those words mean nothing to you, I am so sorry, but I'm going to talk about that in a couple minutes. If those words do mean something to you, you know why 2007 was so good. Let's talk really quickly though. I mentioned at the top here that 2007 was kind of the last year that we didn't have um, this anticipation of fish in our lives. '04, obviously, we get Coventry. It's a breakup. 2005 is kind of this like, what are these guys doing? It's like Shrouded in Darkness. 2006, we talked about last week. You had at least the Grab tour, which gave us kind of a hint of what post Fish could be like if it was going to be this way. 2007 was kind of, to me, the moment of like, okay, this is over for good guys, and Trey is in recovery right now, and Page has a new album coming out. Fishman, I don't really remember what he was doing in 2007. Gordo was kind of active. It was kind of this experience where uh, uh, I feel like it was the first time people were accepting Fish was out of our lives. So by a year from now, when we'll talk about this in 2008, there was suddenly anticipation that they were coming back. But 2007 was this like kind of lost year in terms of Fish. What were your thoughts? Did you have any thoughts about Fish in 2007? Did you have any consideration about the band coming back? I know that you were kind of in a break yourself at that point.
Yeah, not really. I took 2.0 off, and I was really just in this world of like making a family. I was really listening to, like I said, a lot of Grateful Dead. I was listening to some indie music, a lot of pop music, a lot of hip hop. And I was just, kind of in this world of like, I'm an adult now. Fish is like something I listen to every once in a while, kind of like for nostalgia. But no, I felt very removed from it. And I don't know. I think I kind of always thought Fish would come back, but I don't know why. That wasn't like based on anything. But I mean, when you love a band that much, you just always have a hope they're going to come back.
You and my mom. My mom told me,
Really?
yeah, uh, when I got approval to go to Coventry, she was like, "They're just gonna come back," and I was like, "No, no, no, no." I was like, "They're like the Beatles; they will never come back. This is never happening." She was like, "Okay, I know you love them, but they're not the Beatles. They may play the Beatles." I was like, That's insulting, mom. Let's move on from this conversation. Just let me go to Coventry." But she was right. They came back a
Mhm.
couple years later, and she actually remembered saying that and laughed in my face when she found out that they were coming back. She was like, "I told you." Um,
Moms are always right.
Always. I was kind of similar. This is where we align in 2007. I didn't really listen to them, and I'm going to talk about it here in a second. There were some of my favorite albums of all time came out in 2007. I was so deep in music discovery and learning about new music that, to me, the idea of live music, I'm going to be honest, like kind of lost its luster. I was so into like
Mhm.
studio recordings, and I was so into the idea of like what a band could do in a studio, and I was interested in like all these different sounds that I was hearing. And honestly, like the jam band world just felt very far away from me at this point in time, and I didn't really relate to it from a cultural standpoint. I didn't have much of a desire to go to like the offshoot festivals. I hadn't
Mhm.
found like another jam band to jump onto, and it just kind of was something I wasn't paying attention to. And actually, like a good transition into our next topic, as we're talking about this year, the one time I really engaged with the band, I was when I was studying in Europe. I became really close friends with a guy who was an amazing musician and also happened to be a Fish fan. And it was one of the things we discovered like 2 days into our trip was like in our past lives, which at that point was 4 years earlier, we were both diehard Fish fans. And so he and I listened to the 22003 Seven Below uh, on like a tiny little speaker hooked up to an iPod on a bench in Amsterdam while smoking a joint that was like that big. And at one point, I remember distinctly in the jam, he goes, "Listen to that right here. Page just shifted and the whole band listened to him. Everything is impacted by what Page does." And I'd never thought about it like that. And, since then, like I think that there's some give and take. Some band members have like peak periods when other band members are kind of like working through a transition. And, that's kind of the beauty of the band. Like you get certain tours where Fishman is the star of it, or certain tours where Mike is, or Trey's having a great tour. But this was, 2003, and a lot of what Page was doing was really textural. He was playing on the baby grand a lot, but then he would go over to the clav and he'd do really nice things on the organ, and it was just the Rhodes came into play. And I remember listening to it and being like, "Oh my god, I have to go back and listen to every single Fish jam I've ever listened to understand what Page's impact was." But
And so you
I'm
did that,
curious.
right? Knowing
And so
you.
I ended up doing that, and then I was back down the rabbit hole. um I'm curious, like kind of from a broad perspective, I feel like Page is the member that we just kind of, I don't want to say we take him for granted, but I think we do kind of he's all reliable. He's always
Yeah.
there with cool sounds. He's the most dapper member of the band. For a long time I think had the best voice in the band. He's written some really like pleasant songs that like just feel like pleasant rock songs, and then also
Mhm.
some really weird stuff. What are your thoughts on Page as a member, and as like the impact that Page has on Fish?
I mean, he's the chairman of the boards, right? I think for me, Paige was always the person that I gravitated to outside of Trey. I'm always Paige side if I can be, like, that's definitely where I choose to go if I have a choice about it. Although this tour, I spent a lot of time on Mike's side, and he won me over with his Ken outfits, but that's that's a digression. Um, Paige to me is yeah, he's what's awesome about Paige, and I loved this week's kind of assignment to watch this show because I'd never seen it before, was just how effortless he makes things look, and I think that, like, watching him in his show today, which I'm really excited to talk about, he moves through his whole kit so effortlessly, and I always have loved the textural work he's done with the band, and I think that listening back in succession this week to all of his solo albums, which I've listened to all of them, but not kind of together as a project like this, he's an incredible musician and composer. Like, his music is so good and it's really varied. He can write like kind of like classic rock. He can write kind of the Billy Joel like piano ballad, and then he can write really amazing ambient music. He can write jazz standards. Like, he's so diverse as a composer. It was really really fun to listen to him this week.
Matthew Bro, who shared his
Mm,
full details here that I'm going to post on the screen in a second because his travel is wild, amazing. But he just writes, he is the color. I think that is such a interesting way
mm.
to describe him, because like Fishman is like he's the bedrock. Him and Mike are the bedrock. Like one of the beautiful things about those two musicians is they do add color in a rhythm section that usually in the rock world just kind of holds down the beat. But like they are there holding things down. Trey is the out front. He's the leader. He's the aggressive kind of force of the band. But when a jam really takes off, I think as Matthew says here, it's Page. He's the color. Please, more people share your thoughts on here. Neil Landry. Fantastic podcaster and
Mm.
person himself, notes, when I found Fish, Page's playing was the biggest attraction for me. I'll always love his piano playing. It's interesting because what you're describing, Megan, what Neil just said there, like I I had to learn to appreciate Page. For
Mm.
me, the appeal to Fish was three things. It was that it was a combination of rock music and sports, and like sports analyzing in terms of like the changing set lists and the gags and all this sort of stuff. And the way that I thought about sports was now being applied to music. Um, the improvisational aspect of the band was something I'd never really experienced before, and like that hit me. And then it was Trey, and it was the fact that you have this guitarist who is so upfront, aggressive, in your face over the years. And as like a band like this has so many layers that you learn to embrace and learn to understand, I came to appreciate Page. But it wasn't the first thing that hit me. But I agree with you though, and one of my biggest takeaways, as we'll talk about in this show, is I don't understand why there's not more Page songs in the repertoire.
I
uh,
know. I
like
agree. His songs are really good, and he is an incredible singer too, which I think is something that, like, if they didn't have Pages singing in Fish, it would be a much different band.
I agree, and I think like early on when I was a Fish fan, and like one of the big knocks on the band was their vocals. I was always like, well, Page like has
Yeah,
one of the clearest, like crooniest voices in the world. Like he sounds like a classic singer in the Americana sense. I absolutely love it. I think just shouting it out immediately because it's the song that hit me harder than any of them throughout the whole set. But the song "Complex Wind," um,
yeah.
I don't understand how that hasn't been played 100 times by Fish since 3.0 started. I have no understanding. It's a really good song, but then it has this open-ended jam that is like super weird and wild. And to your point, you get these varying sides of Page. Like that solo album, the self-titled one, is like the most classic, just Page sitting down at the baby grand piano and writing songs. But then there's also like weirdness to it. But like as he's evolved and you get unsung songs and movies that never,
Unsung
whatever,
Cities and Movies
that's
Never
it.
Made. Mhm.
That's it. I love that record in 2013. I
I
still
love
listen
it.
to it. Maybe We're the Visitors, like his work with Trey, especially on January, like he adds a weirdness to the band that doesn't come across when you just look at him at face value and he looks like the square in the overall band.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I think maybe We're the Visitors is my favorite one of his albums. That album is so incredibly vibey. Like, that album came out, I think it was, like, in the winter. It was cold, I remember when it came out, and I remember just being, like, playing it over and over again in the dark and just, like, it was incredible.
yeah, I was pretty high up on my year end list when that came out. It was amazing stuff. We're gonna gush more about Paige. Can you tell us? Do you have your history report written about Fish 2007 to give us a rundown of what was going on?
You mean Meg's Corner?
Meg's Corner.
Yeah, I'm ready. Okay, here it is. There's not that much going on in 2007. In early January, Mike Gordon is going to join the group billed as the House Band with some members of the Grateful Dead, and they are going to play a party to honor the new leadership of the United States House of Representatives, a party hosted by Nancy Pelosi. And this group is going to include Mickey Hart, Bill Kreutzmann, Bob Weir, Bruce Hornsby, and Warren Haynes, which is super cool. I didn't remember that he did that. Page is going to release his solo album, obviously, we've been talking about, and that's going to come out in April. And the other members of the band do appear on this album, but they don't all play together in a song, but pretty interesting. And then in July, Trey is going to release his instrumental album, The Horseshoe Curve, which I always want to call The Horseshoe Crab, but that's not the name of the album. And this is his sixth studio album. It's going to come out on his Rubber Jungle Records, and it is recorded between 2002 and 2006. So some of it's live from, I think the title track is part of like the last Tube Jam. And
Mhm.
then I think another song is recorded live too, maybe Burlap Sack and Pumps, I don't remember. And that's going to be released this year as well. And then, of course, August 14th, I was watching this when Brian joined the stream today when we were about to go live. Trey is going to make a surprise guest appearance at SPAC with Dave Matthews Band, and
Mm.
he's going to play Lie in Our Graves with them. And it's the first time that he's coming out and performing since he's been sober and been in recovery. And it is so emotional. I was posting about this on Twitter, and someone had said they had never seen it before. And so understanding the gravity of what Trey was going through and what he had just experienced, and that he hadn't played after he's been sober and made this huge life change and been in recovery. I think he had to get approval from the judge to perform. It is so emotional watching that performance. I cannot watch it without crying. The lyrics of this song are so incredibly moving and perfect for the moment. And watching Trey, you can see him kind of like ease into it. He's like kind of timid at first. And then you see Dave kind of like come up behind him. And then Trey just unleashes and the crowd goes absolutely wild. And it gives me goosebumps just thinking about it because you can see Trey appreciate performing at SPAC probably more than he ever has performed, like appreciated performing anywhere. And it's just a beautiful moment. Two friends, like you just see Dave like loving that his friend is having that moment. And Trey it's so special. And if you haven't seen it, I'm sure everybody has, but if you haven't, you must.
Yeah, it's interesting just about that moment because I've watched it so many times. When we talk about this period in fish history, I think there is a tendency by certain people to be like, well, we don't want to focus on the darkness too much.
Yeah.
And I get that. Like, we don't want to glorify kind of the nasty parts of the 99 to 2006 period in fish history. And we don't want to over embellish it. We don't want to share things that are unnecessary. Like there's a delicateness to this. To me though, when I think about this period, part of the reason why I'm fascinated with the darkness is because of that moment in particular, because that
Yeah.
moment is where all of this changes. And that moment doesn't happen without the the real human story behind this of suffering and struggle and challenge and overcoming challenges and almost losing everything. And so I don't think we ever want to like embellish the really bad stuff, but personally, when I think about this, the really bad stuff leads to this really beautiful moment, which for a lot of artists in the past, we didn't get. And we got that with Trey. And I feel so lucky every time I watch that for him that he got to experience that again. Um, I feel lucky for Dave, who has had his own challenges, that he got to see his friend come through on the other side. And then I feel really lucky for all of us. And I think about, you know, as we both talked about at the top of this episode, neither of us were really, deep into the fish world at this point in time. And had they not come back, like I probably wouldn't have been. It would have been this thing that I
Mhm.
really cared about for a period in time and impacted the way I hear music, but it would not have stayed with me over the years like it has. And ever since late 2008, I mean, I've been back in a way that even more so than I was when I first got into it. And a lot of it comes from that moment. And I think there's a lot of fans that probably feel that way. And I think, for Trey, there were moments throughout spring, summer 2007 where he was starting to see, forgive the speech, but he was starting to see the light and he was starting to see what
Mhm.
was possible in this next phase of his world of his own life. And that, he was still a really young man and was still able at that point in time to take this next step with his life and impact people in a really positive way. And it all kind of starts. I mean, that moment publicly is the first time we see it.
And it's so beautiful to think that that is when he's starting to see the light and appreciate everything that he had with fish in a way I don't think he ever would have had that not happen. And during this year too, while Trey is undergoing rehab and in recovery, the other members of Fish surprise him on his birthday and send him an instrumental recording that they've made for him to play along with on guitar. And Trey has said during this time that he spent 24 hours a day thinking about nothing but fish. And so this is the beginning of the reunion, and it's so beautiful, and I totally agree with you, Brian. If you don't get the darkness, you don't get love and light, and you don't get 3.0, you don't get 4.0. Like, this is it. It's exciting.
100%. Anything else happen in '07?
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, we're waiting for 2008 when we get Rothbury, we get Newport, we get the trade tour, we get the announcement, and we get some pretty cool stuff that's happening as we move towards the reunion. Can we transition and talk pop culture? Everybody's favorite segment of 40 for 40 before we dive into the show.
I know it's mine. Let's do it.
It's mine too, and especially this episode because as I said at the top, this might have been this 2013 and 2015 like might have been my favorite years I've ever lived on the planet. And part of it has to do with, I'm I consume culture, I consume content. I just can't get enough of good television, good books, good movies, good albums, and this year is just rife with it. So just a quick rundown of the Jonathan Hart sponsored best of the year. We're not doing top 5 pop culture moments. This was inspired by our co-host John Hart. Um, Television in 2006 was quite good. We had season 6 of Curb Your Enthusiasm. We had the first season of Mad Men, one of my favorite all-time
Ooh,
television shows. Yeah, it's crazy. It began in
I didn't know it was
2007.
that old. I thought that was
I
a
know.
lot more recent.
Neil Landry is a big fan of this
Thank you,
segment as
Neil.
well. Thank you, Neil.
Yes.
Um,
It's not just
one of
us.
my not just us, one of my favorite shows from 2007, which was a huge defining factor in my study abroad trip, was season 1 of Flight of the Concords. Just amazing stuff out of New Zealand. 22-year-old me thought there'd never been anything funnier produced on the face of the planet. Um, and then my favorite television show of all time, The Sopranos, concluded in the spring and early summer of 2006. The final episode posting on June 10th, 2007. Have you ever watched The Sopranos?
I have, but I haven't watched the whole way through. Like, I watched it intermittently, which I know is totally wrong,
Yeah,
but
I
I'm
don't understand what you mean.
overwhelmed. I know this is gonna, like, upset you. I I'm
I just
overwhelmed to
would you like
start
read like
it.
chapters 1 through 4 of a book and then be like, I'm just gonna skip to 8 and I'll just go to 23 and
Kind of. I mean, I just saw it sometimes. Like, sometimes I would start a season and then I don't know. It's very unlike me, but I never really got super into it. Maybe because I was watching it like that. But, like, is it so overwhelming? I mean, aren't there 100 seasons? Like, can I really start it now?
I think there's like 80 episodes. I think it holds up. It's
Really?
incredible stuff. It gets a little slow in the middle seasons, but like by that point you really like the characters and you really like the varying
You're in
pasta
it.
dishes and you're there for the hang. It's a good and I think the last episode is excellent. Um Movies. I was talking with a close friend of mine. Um I think 2007 might be the last great movie year. We've had some good movie years
Hmm.
since then, but this was amazing. I'm just going to run through this list here. We had Zodiac, David Fincher and Jake Gyllenhaal starring, amazing stuff. We had Knocked Up. We had Ratatouille, an absolutely amazing Pixar film. The Simpsons movie, which was way better than it had any right to be. Superbad,
Oh
Eastern
god,
Promises.
Superman's so funny.
Oh my
So
god.
good. So good.
Eastern Promises, excellent Viggo Mortensen, darkly political murder tale in the Ukraine. And then we get into this is like where it gets insane. The fall of 2007 is mind blowing. The assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, Brad Pitt, and Casey Affleck. Into the Wild,
Mm.
The
Oh,
Darjeeling Limited, my favorite Wes Anderson movie.
so good.
Uh, Michael Clayton, which has one of my favorite endings of any movie in the history of cinema. Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, excellent Ethan Hawke and Philip Seymour Hoffman movie. American Gangster, amazing Denzel Washington
Amazing movie.
performance. No Country for Old Men, I'm Not There, which captures the essence of Bob Dylan better than I think any film ever has. The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, Juno, Walk Hard, maybe the strongest musical just like mockumentary that you could have made. Hilarious movie, amazing John C. Riley. And my personal favorite movie of 2007 and one of my top 3 movies of all time,
Hmm.
Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood.
Ah, I've never
Unbelievable movie.
seen that. I've never seen
Oh
it.
my god.
I've never seen
Oh my god, dude.
I've never seen
Come
it. I
on.
love Daniel Day-Lewis. How have I not
Oh my
seen
god.
that? I don't know.
It is like the best movie about what it means to be an American. It is so good.
Really? Okay, I'm gonna watch
Oh
that this
god.
weekend. But you
Oh
didn't
my
mention a
god.
few of my favorite movies
Go
from that
on.
year. Okay, La Vie en Rose,
No,
the
that's
movie
good.
about
That's
Edith
beautiful.
Piaf.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that movie, and also there's a screen adaptation of my favorite book of all time, Love in the Time of Cholera, which is very good. And then did you ever see Lars and the Real Girl?
Yes, but not for a
Very
long
good
time.
movie. Yeah, yeah, very good movie. Okay, and Atonement I really loved, but mostly because I like the
Atonement
book.
was really yeah, no, it
Mhm.
was good. Matthew Bro here with the line of the episode. He keeps coming. I drink your milkshake. All right, music. Do you know what the number one song in America was in the first week of July 2007?
Let me think, no.
It might be the greatest pop song of all time. It is
Beyonce?
by Rihanna.
Oh, Umbrella.
Oh my god.
I mean, she burst onto the scene with that song, and it, like I remember when that song was huge, and I remember I was, like, out to dinner with friends, and it came on, and I was super pregnant, and I was, like, dancing, and I was like, "This song is so good, it will make, like, even a super pregnant woman dance to it." Like, it is she changed
Oh,
everything when she came out with that song. It's so good.
yeah, I love this song. And I was still at an age and being in Europe, I was going to dance clubs, which I've never done before in any other facet of my life. And this song was played all the time. It was
It
amazing.
was, yeah.
Um, Record wise, this is an insane year. I'm just going to run through this. Burials Untrue, Radiohead in Rainbows, a record that came out by surprise. You could pay what you wanted for this record.
Crazy.
I I remember being in a bar in Spain and a song from this album came on, which I'm blanking on the title. It was towards the end of the album. I'm really embarrassed right now that I can't remember, but it doesn't matter. It came on and I started talking with this guy next to me and I was like, we were talking about the record and he just looks at me and he goes, "This album is the revolution." And like at the time it seemed like the most prophetic statement ever. I don't know really what he's talking about now in reverse, but
It's very dramatic.
Stars of the Lid and their refinement of the decline. LCD Sound System, Sound of
Oh
Silver.
my god, I love that album.
Oh, Arcade Fire, Neon Bible, Bon Iver, Forever, For Emma, Forever Ago.
Oh, Be Still
Just
My Heart.
give us your thoughts on that because I know that you were listening to that a bunch this week.
Yeah, I mean, that album at the time, I didn't listen to it in 2007. I don't even know when I found it, but when I found that album, I just I don't think there's ever been a better heartbreak album out there. Like, I just couldn't stop listening to it, and it was so great this week to put it back on and just relish in that, and the backstory is so cool. It's just like, there's when art is made because an artist needs to make it, like, for survival, that is like, there's just something different about the way that art hits, and you can hear his needing to process his grief and his emotion in a way that is very rare in art. Gorgeous.
I agree completely. I found this record, it hit me at a very specific point in my life, and I think it was tailor-made for people who were within kind of our range of age where, um, you were going through things, you were processing these, like, adult feelings for the first time in a lot of cases, and an album like this went so direct towards it, and the backstory complemented it, and it felt
Mm,
like something that anybody could have made, which, like, there was an accessibility to his story and to what he was going through. Just amazing stuff. Just continuing because there's so much. The National Boxer, the record where the National becomes the National. Panda Bears, Person Pitch. This is my favorite record of 2007. It's one of my favorite records of all time. I encourage anyone who hasn't listened to it and loves soundscapes to please go and listen to this. Spoons, Ga 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 Ga. I think I got that
I
right.
love this album. I love worst name
It's
ever,
just
but
so great.
it's so good. Like, this is the album you put on when you're, like, making dinner and you're having friends over and they're not here yet, but you're, like, almost ready and you're just, like, finishing the last bit of food that you're preparing and you, like, pour yourself your first drink and you're just, like, dancing in your kitchen. Like, I love this album start to finish. So good.
Yeah, this is kind of, I mean, I'm a huge Spoon fan, and I think, their career has evolved, like, they've done this fascinating thing where they kinda like the National, they stick within this, like, indie rock frame of reference, but they also, like, they jump out and they experiment here and there. This record is like Boxer, like, this distills the Spoon sound and the Spoon vibe down
Yeah.
to 10 songs, all very accessible, amazing, amazing stuff. Andrew Bird's Armchair Apocrypha, Animal Collective's Strawberry Jam, Jens Lekman's Night Falls over Cortadala, The White Stripes' Icky Thump, Lowe's Drums and Guns, Modest Mouse's We Were Dead Before the Ship Even Sank, Bruce Springsteen, Magic. If you are a Springsteen fan out there and you've not listened to Magic, I don't know what is going on with you, but you need to change that because holy shit, this is like mid 2000s Bruce channeling 1970s Bruce. It's amazing stuff. The first great Deer Hunter record, Cryptograms, Wilco's Sky Blue Sky. Shout out Mr. Rob
Mm.
Mitchum for coining the term dad rock as a result of this record, a record that has long
Really?
lasted.
I didn't know
His
that's where
his
that came from.
his review of it about dads listening to this record while they mow the lawn, which is so goddamn accurate. But this record has outlasted any like immediate disappointment people had that they like removed all the darkness from Wilco and just like reduced them down to these are the instruments, these are the musicians. It's a beautiful album. Probably it's in the canon of Sunday morning albums. Just a couple
Mm.
more because oh my god, this year. Uh, St. Vincent's Marry Me. I think it's either her first or second record, but it's really, really beautiful, really artsy, kind of weird. Kanye West, we can still talk about him in this period because
Yeah.
Graduation came out and Graduation fucking rules. MGMT's Oracular Spectacular and Bill Callahan's Woke on a Whale Heart. My God,
Mm.
2007 was something else. And as Neil says, apparently my musical identity was solidified in 2007. Guess I forgot about that. I'm right there with you. This was everything I love today started in 2007.
Well, that's the weird things about this project is, like, you go back and you realize, like, what happened in that year musically, and it's like, "Whoa," like, 2 albums that I just wanna add that you didn't mention that were huge for
Please.
me were Jay-Z's American Gangster. This was huge. It was the soundtrack to the film. It showed he still had the lyricism and the ability to make music with feeling. First really good album post his, like, retirement, and, I think that the soundtrack allowed him to talk about, like, the hustler that he once was and tap into that kind of striving, and that's what Jay-Z does best. So I love that album, and also Kala by MIA. She is just a force to be reckoned with, and this album is so singular. Her music is just doesn't sound like anybody else. It's got, like, that pop club sensibility with, like, Bollywood stuff, and she does everything, and she does it so well and interesting. You put on an album of hers, and it's not you're not relaxing and chilling out, you're intellectually engaged the whole time, and I love that about her.
Love that stuff. I think to your point, like the thing that makes this project so fascinating is not only are we charting fish history, but we're charting our own history and we're charting what really
Yeah.
like impacted us. And Chris Lambry, great call here. You're right. I should have mentioned this as
Mm.
well. The Shins wincing the night away. Amazing record that showed that there were some long lasting ideas for them. That they were not just a early 2000s kind of here's a few big singles, here's a few big albums like Shoots and Ladders is a great record, but this one wincing the night away is awesome. Two additional points I want to make about 2007 because I am introducing one new subsection to this show. So
New?
the
24
parents
shows in?
the
The
parents
parents
aren't
are
here. We're
gone.
introducing them. All right. So
They
on
are.
this day, which I try to find something that happened on the day of each show, and sometimes there's just not much that happens. But on this day, July 8th, 2007, Roger Federer won Wimbledon for the fifth straight year.
Mm.
He beat Rafael Nadal in 5 sets. 1 year later, Nadal would win in what I think is the best tennis match ever played. So this is like peak Roger, which is also um, my mom wanting to be in a second marriage because Roger Federer was everything
We
for her.
all we
Um,
all we all
uh,
do.
I
We all
mean,
do.
I mean,
We all do.
the new section I want to fit in though is who won in American sports in this year, and so we're going to start
Wait, this is
2007.
only something you're doing because Jonathan's not here. I think everybody knows, but when Jonathan and RJ are definitely the ones who keep Brian and I hemmed in. So, like, this is for sure going off the rails, and I'm loving it. So, go ahead.
We're speaking about a one set show here. We got to have some content. Come on. Super Bowl 41, the Colts over my pathetic Bears. The NBA Finals, the Spurs over the Cavs, the NHL Stanley Cup, the Ducks over the Senators, and the World Series, the Red Sox over the Rockies, who won 21 of 22 games before being swept by the Red Sox.
Was that I was in Boston for one of the Red Sox wins.
One of the
When
Red Sox
when
wins.
did they
Now,
win
this
recently
cursed
that area
franchise that has
around
won
that?
four and they won
No, but
04, 07, 13, and 18.
it must have been '04. I think.
That was the
Must
big
have been
one. That was the
'04.
curse
Yeah.
breaker.
Yeah, so I was at a bar. This is really going off the rails. We were at a bar, like, not that far from Fenway when that happened, and that was, like, the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. So,
I was in college watching that, and even in Montana, people were losing their minds.
yeah.
Neil, I'm here for a great tennis match of all time bracket. I've got like 50 in my head that I can share and start to rank with you. All right. Thank you all for hanging with us here as we went 42 minutes,
It's
nearly
impressive.
the length of the Berkeley Tweezer, talking about not the show in question, which is July 8th, 2007. So we're going to dive into this. One thing I want to note, this show is not available on re-listen. There
Mhm,
are only 2 years in fish history that are not on live fish, 2 years post 1990, 2007 and 2008. So we had to do a lot of digging here, and we did discover
mhm.
the show. It's on YouTube. And when I say digging, there are only 754 views on YouTube. And I
I
have to
know.
imagine that 15 of those are from us over the last week, just logging back
Exactly.
because nobody's watching this. And I don't really understand it. It's a full show. It's Paige as the center of it. There's some really cool moments throughout this. We're going to talk a bit about it, but we should post this link.
Mhm.
I should probably post this here in the comments. Do you want to read through the set list while I get this pulled up for people?
Yeah, so this is at the High Sierra Music Festival, and Page had a pretty good sized tour that spring and summer. He did over 20 dates, mostly from late May through July, and he was playing venues like Irving Plaza, the 930 Club, the Fillmore, the Fox Theater, and he is the headliner here at Sierra Music Festival in Quincy, California. And he played 2 shows this day, I believe, but this is the second show. And yeah, this is a great video of this. And the set reads as Stuck in the Middle with You, Heavy Rotation, Maid Marian, Complex Wind, Runaway Bride, Walk the Proud Land, Back in the Basement, Rules I Don't Know, Close to Home, Beauty of a Broken Heart, Cars, Trucks, Buses.
So I just posted a link for people. Don't watch it now. Keep watching us. But afterwards, if what we say intrigued you, because I imagine a lot of people haven't heard the show. Let's dive into this, and maybe we take this in threes,
Okay.
just as kind of we work through the set because it's a full, basically like a 2 hour set that happens right around sundown. It's a really like by the end of the show, it's just beautiful in Quincy,
Yeah.
California. Like the sun is just set and it looks cooler, and but Paige comes out and you get a real sense of, I say this lovingly, why Paige is not the band leader in Fish.
Totally.
I don't think he loves this role. He does embrace it,
Yeah.
and like, it's a small, very friendly crowd and people are clearly amped to see him and he rises to the occasion, but you do get a sense throughout the show that like he doesn't want to do like the mid-song banter. He kind of just wants to play and let Trey or, Fishman talk to the crowd. Although there was that period in like early 3.0 where Paige would greet the crowd like 2 songs
Yeah.
in, which was very strange. Um, so Stuck in the Middle with You, Heavy Rotation, Maid Marian. What were your big highlights from this opening segment?
Really quickly, I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about who he's playing with. He's
Mm,
playing with Jared Slomoff, who's a record producer, engineer, musician in Burlington. He's worked on a lot of Fish albums. He's playing the keys, the backup vocals, and a little bit of guitar as well. And he's on this tour with Paige. I think most of them do most of this tour. On lead guitar is Adam Zimmon, and he's also toured with them with Vita Blue. Is it pronounced Vita or Vita Blue or Vita Blue?
I've always pronounced it Vita.
Vita. Okay, so he toured with Vita Blue as well. And Rob O'Day, he is playing bass on this tour. He's also an engineer in Burlington, and he only played
Sick
on this
bass.
tour. Yeah, he's so good. He's not on the album, but he's on this tour. And then on the drums, we have Gabe Jarrett. He is an adjunct professor at the University of Vermont, and his dad was Keith Jarrett, who is the pianist and composer who played with Miles Davis. Just kind of cool.
Unbelievable pianist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it's got a great band, and I think that they have like a pretty good flow and vibe together. I think the show in general has really great flow and really good set listing. I think Trey does Paige does a good job of like having a few covers in there and ending with the Fish tune. But I think they start off nice. I think Stuck in the Middle with You, the Steelers wheel cover, Paige voice sound amazing. It's a perfect opener. Like give the crowd something they know.
My only note on Stuck in the Middle with You is why. Um, so we're
It's
just gonna
fun. It's like you got to give the crowd something they know to start out with. You didn't like it?
no, I don't like this song, and I've now gone
This
2
is a
weeks.
great song.
Really? You think so? Can you give me like
It's like a classic, like, it sounds like you're, like, I don't know, watching TV in the '80s or something. Like, it's just
yes, it does.
maybe you're too young. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I might be. This may be an you can give me the ageism argument. That's totally fine. I don't know. This song reminds me of uh like for whatever reason, this song was played like at every middle school dance I went to because I feel as
Really?
though the DJ at our middle school dance assumed that this was music that like we wouldn't pay attention to this song. Like we would just like it would just be able to be played and be like a fun background music song. And like
Yeah.
me being the hypercritical 11-year-old at a middle school dance was like, I fucking
You're
hate
like
this song.
he's over there, like, timing the set list starts, like, with his arms crossed. I just imagine you.
I just, I don't know, the song for whatever reason, it's never connected with me. It's always felt like, someone it's like a mosquito in my ear, and I'm fascinated to know that, you really like this song, and I think that, I'm gonna need to dive into both the lyrical concept and the history behind the song. I'm not gonna do this with Mustang Sally because I refuse to give that song any cred, but I will at least listen to this song and
Okay,
get the
listen, I
perspective.
haven't listened to it that closely, and I'm not gonna, like, die for this song, all right? I'm just saying I don't mind it as, like, an opener at a festival, it's just, like, whatever, but this is interesting that you feel so strongly about it. It's good to know.
I'm
You
glad
can
that we've
dive
spent
into it and report back.
I'm glad that we've spent 3 minutes debating this song. Um, Heavy Rotation, to me, it's crazy this has only been played 3 times by Fish. I
Yeah.
completely forgot this was played at Dick's. This is, like, in the home Hall of Fame for me of, like, a Page song that sounds just like a song, but then it
Mhm.
has this really cool jam segment in it, and I feel like this is a song that, like, could be this along with Home, could be developed further by Fish and give them something that, like, it's just a classic mid set one song that has like all this open space jamming. I thought this was really cool. And um Maid Marian, I remember hearing this song when it came out, and it was like that song that was the very clear, like Paige had a rough couple of years there and had a lot of
Yeah.
personal strife and challenges. And like a couple of these songs, Maid Marian, Runaway Bride, Rules I Don't Know, Beauty of a Broken Heart, these are like just pour your heart out. You talk about like
Totally.
the sentiment around the Bon Iver record, that we talked about earlier. These are in that sort of like confessional, like I'm not going to hide behind what happened. I'm just going to talk openly about the challenges in my life. And I think there's something really admirable in that from a songwriting standpoint. And I don't know, this song both has that, and it just has this beautiful kind of fading jam with Paige on the lead. I don't know what your thoughts were on these two.
I love Heavy Rotation. When I saw you and I have both seen 2 of the performances then, because when they played it at AC last year, it
Mm,
was that moment when nobody knew what was being played, and everybody was, like, looking around like, "What is this?" I love it. It's just, like it's got an easy swing to it, and then the rock breakdown, the guitar, like, gets after it, then it has this, like, energetic, kind of, like, devolving type 1 jam, Page just going after it on the electric piano. So good. He builds the intensity. Yeah, I think this song should get more play with Fish for sure. And I like Maid Marian too. It has like a satisfying chorus and a great solo moment. Beautiful, really delicate ending with the keys. It's a nice song.
yeah. It's really nice, and it leads into my highlight of the overall set, which is Complex Wind. To me, I'd completely forgotten about this song. I hadn't gone back and really listened to the Page solo the self-titled album in quite some time, and I went back and re-listened to that record alongside of watching this show. And the jam in this version, I mean, it's just
Mhm.
it shows what has made, like, as Fish has evolved since 2007 and when they got back together. And so much of, I think, those early years of 3.0 were propped up by Paige and Mike really adding
Mhm.
color to the band in a way that Trey couldn't at that time quite yet. He could, like, he had moments, but like on a consistent basis, like if you listen to those Hampton '09 shows, the star of that run is Paige. And so much of his impact on the band, to me, in my ears, I like root back in a song like this where he was still, once he got into a good place, he was experimenting, he was evolving, he was developing further as a keyboardist. And you hear it in a song like this that, like, I mean, if we're going to get 3 heavy rotations in a 12-year period in time and a 15-year period in time since this song was written, like, we should at least get a couple complex wins. This song rules, and it's the type of thing that would add a very different tone to a Fish second set if it was played.
I can see that. I love the beginning of this version too. He like puts the loops on to start and he looks around, he takes his hands away as if to say like, I'm not doing it. It's just really cool. This song has like that like Pink Panther vibe. It's like super fast electronic drum beat. It's the drummer's killing it. And then it's got that like deep growly bass lines, a lot of distortion, switching tempos, and then it gets like really psychedelic. And Paige starts doing those like really juicy, spacey noises, but there's still a rhythm underneath. It's just this is great. Paige jumps on the organ at the end. Then they come back like really effortlessly into the kind of undercover vibe that they had at the beginning and the riff of the song. I loved this too. Probably one of the highlights of the show.
I thought this also had a really big impact on just the rest of the set in that it kind of settles the band in a nice way.
Mhm.
Because Runaway Bride, kind of 70s McCartney type of, it's it's almost like Jackson Brown.
Yeah.
It's that like warm, like studio driven, confessional song similar to what Maid Marian was, but it doesn't sound straightforward here. Like the band sounds like they've like eased back into like a really comfortable chair. And it's what you imagine, sessions at the barn are like after a couple of days once the guys like really get settled in. And that song and Walk the Proud Land, which it's kind of like a white Caribbean yam, these songs
Right.
showcase that, like, Page seems like he's a really good hang. He just seems like the kind of guy who, for as for as much as I said earlier, like, I don't know how much he loves the idea of being the band leader. It does seem in this band, and I got it really in the vibe in these, kind of midway through this set, that this is 100% Page's band. and these guys are here playing their heart out for Page, and they want to show up here for Page in the way that like you see the people in Tab, like they're all surrounding Trey, like to see Page in the center there, and to see him in these kind of songs as we're going from jazz to Confession to kind of almost a Yamar type of feeling to Back in the Basement, which is heavier and rock. Like this is all stuff through Page's heart and soul, and people are really showing up for that. It's a cool thing.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of these people, these musicians are also, engineers and producers that have been working with the band. So you get the sense that like Page has really great relationships with the people that he works with.
Totally.
And, you could see them, yeah, being excited to tour with him and play with him and they're having a great time. And yeah, it's a fun little reggae cover, fun little Bob Marley cover. And then but Back in the Basement gets after it. It's like it's nice rock and roll. It's like groovy, it gets jazzy, and this is a killer jam. This is one of those moments that I kind of wanted to have timestamps to know like how long these songs were because I wasn't tracking it. I was wondering if you were, but I was like thinking like, how long is this jam been? It's really good. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, and the recording on the album is around 10 minutes. So, like you get
Mhm.
the sense that like there's just open experimentation as they're playing this. I think you bring up a really interesting point about like you know him employing session musicians and engineers from Vermont on his records, and it's something like I was just thinking about it how in all pretty much all the cases, Tab, Mike Gordon Band, Jazz Mandolin Project, like and here, when these guys are playing solo, they're not like going to New York or LA to find
Mhm.
musicians in all that cases. Like they're bringing guys out of Burlington, Vermont, who any small town in America is going to have bar bands and is going to have musicians, like local musicians who run the record stores or run the guitar shops, and then they play at the bar down the street in classic rock band, and they're really good musicians, but they're not getting attention outside of that town. And the cool thing about Fish is that they're bringing those guys out into the wider world, and it's a I don't want to say noble, but it's a really good way to give back to the community that's given them so much, is really propping up these musicians. Um, Back in the Basement, just really quickly, my one note from a jam standpoint is I got a very Goose feel from this jam. It is very
Oh,
peak
I like
driven,
that.
pages on the
Yeah.
organ. It is not going into like complex dissonant space in a lot of cases. It's really like the peak is everything, and you really get a sense of for me as a listener, like where a lot of my interest will go as I evolve is this sense of just like a really warm and kind of like a warm embracing peak that you get here.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I wanna go back and listen now for that. That's cool. And I think how it goes into Rules I Don't Know, which has that kind of Billy Joel, like, lounge singer song, which is really nice. I love how it gets quiet and really highlights Paige, and I think it's a nice kind of balance to Back in the Basement, which is pretty big.
I agree. And then we move in. Yeah, Rules I Don't Know, Close to Home, Beauty of a Broken Heart close out this main set. Rules I Don't Know. I mean, it's broken, it's shattered. It is the type of thing that like he wrote. I was reading his letter because I'd forgotten Paige wrote a letter a couple weeks after Trey's to break up the band, and Paige writes a letter that basically talks about how he's gone through a lot of personal changes in his life. He'd recently been through a divorce. The most important thing in his life at that point was his daughter, and he wanted to get off the road for a bit. You just get this sense. Well, he also talks in there about how he and these guys were like my age right now when Fish was breaking up in 2004, and I just had this experience. I went back to my college town like 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it's 20 years since I went to college. And it was this like just mind blowing experience of like thinking about how much time has passed since then and how much I thought I knew of myself when I went there and how much I've experienced since that period in time. And Paige talks about how being in this band since he was in college, he's almost for 20 years thought about the past, because even as the
Mm,
band was evolving, they were staying true to this thing that they started in 1985. And it was the first time in his life as an adult that he really had the opportunity to think towards the future and think about the present and what was to come, and not about who he was based on Fish. And so I hear Rules I Don't Know, and I almost hear like, obviously I'm talking about a divorce, but hear him talking about like, I had no idea life was supposed to work this way, and I had no idea
mhm.
like these things were going to change. And did you get that sort of sentiment from these lyrics? Like, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I think so many of these songs are so self-reflective, and I think about what it must be like. So many of us have huge dreams, and we have to adapt those dreams because of reality. Well, these guys had huge dreams and they came true. And I think that
Totally.
when you're on that, you're riding that wave and you're just in that dream. And I think that when that ends, then you have to look at what's outside of that dream that you have. And I think that that's something that when you do give up a dream, it's usually because you want to fill your life with other things too, right? And certainly in my life, I can relate to that. So I can imagine if you have filled your life mainly with this dream, when it ends, it's kind of like, well, now I have to really look at what's here, right? And, like, it's sobering, and I think that I haven't read that letter in a long time, but I'm gonna go back to that because it's interesting hearing him reflect like that and think about that, and so many of these lyrics are like that. Just I mean, "Beauty of a Broken Heart" is like it's an incredible song. I've known about the song and I've knew what the lyrics were about, but going back and reading them, they're stunning. They're really beautiful. I'm skipping ahead in the show, but it's just incredible. It's incredible lyricism. It has like such a great hook. It's so thoughtful. Knowing that it was written after the Fish breakup, it's just knowing that they played it at Hampton when they came back, it's a really meaningful song.
Yeah, it's only been played 14 times. The last time played was October 17th, 2021. I think I've only seen it once, maybe twice. I remember
Mm,
distinctly seeing it late in set one on 12/29/2016, and it hitting particularly hard. I agree with you. I think it gets a weirdly bad rap. I think a lot of these like mid-tempo page songs are viewed incorrectly as kind of like
mhm.
bathroom breaks or as kind of like set pausers. I tend to find, I mean, I don't love all of them. I'm personally not a huge fan of like Army of One, but I think
Yeah.
what really makes this song work is he's written like this almost straightforward confessional piano ballad that like that image like brings up, Billy Joel, Jackson Brown. It's like an inside joke in like classic rock, but like he roots the song in the groove and like the bass is what drives
Mhm.
the song. And so you have these very personal, reflective, just like naked lyrics about how he felt going through this experience, but also the upside of that and what that makes you realize. But then within that, like, is this thing that defines so much musically of what I love about Page is that there's a groove and that there is a dedication to experimentation. So you have these like two things working where it's very standard, straightforward 70s rock. And then also like he's bringing in different sounds and it makes those lyrics, which in a different setting, I think would fall a little bit flat. The way he's scored the song and the way that like musically it comes across much more complex. It comes across.
I think I lost Brian for a minute. I'm not sure if it's me or it's him, but I totally agree with what you're saying, Brian. And I have never seen this song and I would love to see it. There's a live version on the album that is just absolutely beautiful. There's like the studio version in the beginning of the album, and then later towards the end of the album, it's just absolutely gorgeous, totally live, beautiful version that's like 10 or 12, 15 minutes long. I love that. And then Close to Home, which they played right before Beauty of a Broken Heart, it's political, it's got a pretty cool message. The only perspective you've got is your own, and Paige is laying on the synths in that jam, which I really, really like, which is great. I'm not sure if Brian's gonna be able to come back in and join us. Let's see. Yeah, he's gonna come back in a minute, so I'll keep going while we wait for him to come back in. Paige closes out with Cars, Trucks, Buses, which is just like he looks like he's just having so much fun, and it's a nod to the crowd to play this song at the end of the show, and it was cool to watch the video and see people dancing, and they show the crowd a bunch, and I think it made me think a lot about what Brian and I were talking about earlier, about how I wasn't involved in the jam world at that time, and to see people who obviously were, and I think that's really cool that people were kind of still invested and still excited, and they're seeing Paige and High Sierra. How awesome is that? It's so great, and Yeah, I think it was a really great show. If you haven't checked out the show, I would highly, highly recommend you do it. It's a really great 2 hours. You can kinda have it on when you're doing other things in the kitchen or something and check it out. It's really, really great to see. Okay. Oh, Incredible Purpose saying he got to catch it. You got to catch Beauty of a Broken Heart at the Hampton debut and then again at that New Year's in Miami. Yes, I absolutely love that they played it at the Hampton debut. I think it's so, like, meaningful that they did that because they was obviously saying, Paige wrote that after the breakup. So the fact that they were playing that at the Hampton comeback in '09 is just, like, so special. Yeah. Neil, we do need you to hop on. You're right, McGrupp. Come on in, Neil. We'll wait and see if Brian can come back on. But if anyone else has any other Paige memories they want to share, I'd love to hear them. It's so nice to kind of shine the spotlight on Paige because he's just such a special member of the band. And he seems very humble and always willing to kind of like lay back and let others take the spotlight. And it's been really fun to kind of focus on him this week and think about all the great stuff he's been doing and was doing in 2007. I mean, I think he was touring. He was the only one really touring that year, which is pretty incredible. Thank goodness somebody was. All right, everyone. Well, I think we're going to wrap up there. Thank you all so much for joining us. I love everyone in the chat. Really appreciate you. And we'll be back next week. We'll be talking about 2008. I have an idea what we're going to talk about, but I'm not going to share it yet. So we'll be putting that out on socials really soon. But in the meantime, have a great week. And we'll see you in 2008 next Friday. Thanks, everyone.